Hi there, it's Jonathan Herps, founder and CEO of Scale Up Growth. Welcome to my Business Focus series where I chat with owners, managing directors, founders, and business leaders to scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies. Today, it's my great pleasure to speak to Rishni Ratnam, who is CEO of MXA. Hi, Rishni.
Hey, Jonathan.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure, and thanks for taking the time. So tell me, what is MXA? What do you do, and how long have you been doing it?
So MXA is a management consultancy focusing on digital strategy, innovation, and operations issues. Really, we kind of help sort of mid to large organizations solve their hairiest sort of technology and digital related problems. I've been basically a bit of management consultant for about 10 years. Before that, I was a software developer and a data scientist and a mathematician and all these kinds of things. And I've been in MXA for a bit over a year now.
Okay. So talk to me a bit more about their hairy issues.
Well, I suppose there's two ways that you can kind of look at this. One of them is kind of like the romantic side of management consulting, and then there's kind of the practical side. The romantic side is really about how do we help people figure out what are the problems that they actually need to solve, and then help them figure out what is the answer to that, that problem. And then usually because we're in an organization, how do we get everybody within that team to align behind that answer and then sort of execute? So it's very much sort of this sort of problem solving skill set. The practical side of it is usually we're dealing with specific digital challenges, whether that be how do I deal with developing a new product or service, or I've got this massive cloud that I use. Maybe I'm a big bank, I'm a large government organization, use a whole lot of Amazon and Microsoft, and how do I consolidate that to reduce cost? And the practical side is therefore more about tangible benefits. Can I reduce my costs? Can I grow market? Those kinds of things.
So can you, without naming a client, can you give me a couple of examples?
Yeah. So on the sort of strategic end, I mean, really, IT and digital strategy is one of the things we do, which is really about what are you doing and what should you not do when it comes to your use of technology within the organization or within the business. How much cloud should we focus on? How do we get the right talent in order to execute on new cloud technologies? What should we do with AI? Where are the primary use cases and where are the big risks? So these kinds of strategic ones. And then more practical, it could be something like, we need to develop a new product or service because our business is really falling behind the times. What makes sense for us, given our existing assets and capabilities, our existing talents? Where are we most likely going to find the best opportunities? Those blue oceans, all those kinds of things. And then it may be a design-led kind of piece, or it may be an innovation-led piece as well. So two sort of ends of the spectrum.
So you're talking about hairy problems for medium to big companies. So who would you describe as your best customer, your core customer?
This is an interesting question. I suppose, one of the privileges of being a small organization is that, we can serve almost anybody, but actually we can be also picky about who we serve. I mean, for me, my best customer is about someone who we consider a values alignment with. Being a small business, we're very values driven. We like to do work with organizations that align with us about trying to do good. And so in many ways, there is a values alignment that's important. But of course, when I said sort of medium to large, there's also a scale issue. When you're dealing with these kind of big, hairy problems, strategic level questions, you need a certain scale of organization to get the sort of ROI that you need to justify calling in sort of experts like someone like us. So we'll typically deal with sort of small and mid-sized government departments, probably deal with digital attackers, not necessarily sort of like, big established institutions like big banks or big telcos, but maybe the people who want to aspire to be something like that.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Susan, this next question, I'm about to go, I mentioned your interview number 85, so I'm about to rejig some of these questions for the next series, for want of a better word. And this next question in future is going to be on AI. So maybe we can address the...
I've been talking about AI anytime.
Okay, so let's start by asking you, of all the actions, we've all been through the pandemic. Of all the actions you took in the pandemic, what stuck with the business and will remain with the business?
I think the most relevant thing that's come out of the pandemic for me is around hybrid work. There's been obviously a lot of debate about, is it better to be in office? Is it better to be working from home? For me, the answer is it really depends on your talents and the nature of your business and your culture. There is no one right answer. But for us, where our core differentiator is having the best people dealing, thinking related problems. We're not out there manufacturing tools. For us, it makes sense to have a hybrid model because in the office, when you're together as a team, you can build culture really well. You can solve problems much better. And you can be in many ways more productive when you're solving team related problems. But to be honest, working from home sometimes, as you can see I am today, sometimes it's just nice. And sometimes I can just dive into something that's really hairy just myself and tackle it over the course of a day without interruptions. So that hybrid model has really been something that, let's be honest, it didn't really exist at the level that it did before COVID. And, as a consultant, clients expected me to be on site before COVID. Now, after COVID, they're quite happy for me to spend a few days a week working from home.
It's interesting you say that. I've over the next 2 weeks, I have two of my clients. I do one-on-one advice and coaching, and I also do founder, CEO, and leadership team. And 2 of the clients have recently upgraded to the full-on engagement. And in the next 2 weeks, I'm actually meeting them face to face for the first time, even though they've been clients for over a year and a half. It's extraordinary how it has changed the way we do business.
It has, and it depends a lot on your team and your talent. Like if you've got really high achievers, then an unsupervised kind of work style, like at home, works perfectly fine because people will be driven to get the outcome.
Yeah.
If your business recruits from the sort of the middle of the talent pool, then maybe you need a more supervisory model, and so a person makes more sense. So there's lots of nuances to this, and I don't think there's one right answer. We're high end; we can trust people to do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's managing by objectives, managing by project, and my team is spread all over the world. The fellow who's going to the 2 people involved in actually producing this podcast, apart from me doing the interview, one's in the Ukraine and one's in the Philippines.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I don't care what time they work as long as we hit the deadlines, etc. And the quality, doesn't.
That's right. The outcome.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, throw you a question that is not on the list, which is about AI. I'm using ChatGPT for all the time now, both for my business and for my clients.
Yeah.
But I'm not, and when I say all the time, 8, 10, 15 times a day.
Yeah.
But I'm, just give us a little bit of a broader idea of the applications of AI right now in business and that you're working on.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things that's happened really since November 22, when ChatGPT came out, which popularized these sort of large language models, people used to think that AI was going to hit sort of the blue collar workforce and the low skilled workforce, and all those low skilled jobs would be automated. But people who are lawyers and accountants or consultants like me will be fine because we're so highly trained and so special. Actually, that's been blown out of the water. And if you actually understood AI, you would have known that the more knowledge-based it is, the more logical it is. In other words, the more trained and skilled, actually, the easier it is to automate. And so now what we're seeing is disruption around those sort of thought-related jobs, professional services, and all these sorts of things. And that's been the really interesting shift for me, and the one that I'm seeing sort of go into so many different workplaces. But the thing that's sort of butting heads against that is most people haven't really sort of developed a capability around critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, like all of those future skills that you need to get the most out of something like ChatGPT. As you know, if you use it, it gets stuff wrong all the time. That's not a problem. If you know how to think critically and you know how to collaborate with somebody, it getting it wrong is fine because you can see it when you got a feeling for it, and you can talk to it and go, actually, this doesn't seem right. How about this? And you get into that conversation. So, there's this thing that the sort of white collar jobs are now being automated, but actually people's skills need to uplift so that they can make the most of it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I was on a call with a client yesterday, and the client's looking at a potential acquisition. So I just pulled up ChatGPT and said, okay, let's just brainstorm this a little bit. One of the interesting things that she pulled me up on, or not pulled me up, she made the point. She said, "You're saying please and thank you." I said, "Yeah, that's just me." And just because it's technology, to me, I had an interesting experience of that this morning. my son came and he said, "Dad, why are you still in bed?" I said, "Because I fell over last night, tripped over my dog, tripped over the puppy, and I sprained my ankle, or maybe broke my ankle. I didn't know at the time." And but I made the comment, tripped over the bloody dog, which I shouldn't have done in front of my son. But Google, I've got one of those little things. Google came up and said, "That's not very nice." That was number one, which is really interesting. But we sat down with the client and I said, "Okay, and once again, it's your critical thinking point, and it's a critical thing." So I said to ChatGPT, I'm a CEO of this type of company based in New South Wales, Australia. This is where we focus. This is my core customer. This sort of questions I'm asking you. I'm looking at an acquisition in this space. What legal documents would I need for this acquisition? Cool. The critical piece in there, New South Wales, Australia.
Yeah.
Write me the key terms for an acquisition letter of offer. Write me, now obviously, never go through with this without checking with a lawyer. But write me the letter of offer. Write me a press release. Write me this document. What considerations do I need to put into this legal document? Write me 10 Twitter feeds to promote it. Write me, etc.
Yeah.
But it really interesting thing was right at the end, because we were prompted and re-prompted. Right at the end, the final question I put in, now that you learned all of the above, how would your advice to be changed? It's fascinating how, just watching this technology. And it gave, there was one particular area it gave a critical change to the advice it had given us up until then. But in the space of 10 minutes, what we put out there, blew her mind. It's something I'd done before. So, but really, expanded the CEO, and a very successful CEO, her mind unbelievably.
And I think that's shocking sometimes when I remember showing ChatGPT to my father, who's a successful business executive, and getting into work on some things. And when people understand how to use it, it actually does blow your mind. You're like, holy smokes, this thing is at least as smart as most of the people I've worked with.
Oh, absolutely. I equated to it's like having a third year out marketing graduate and a process graduate on my staff for $30 a month. But I haven't even touched the sides of the other, overlaying things that's going onto the channel. I haven't even got there yet. But it is, for anybody listening, you need to get onto ChatGPT 4, pay the $30 a month and experiment, because it is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's right. And so some of the work that we do, so one of our little side projects is developing technology that specifically uses these things. And we do that for enterprise. And so the big questions that we ask is, how can you use these technologies and build these technologies to be secure, to be private, and to be explainable? Because for business, the key thing about a lot of this is, do I know that the data that I'm putting there is going to the right places or not going to the wrong places in many cases? So, for example, if you're using ChatGPT, there's a nice little button that you can click that says, "Don't save and use my data." You should click that one. And then, so security obviously goes without saying. And then explainability is really about, if I get an answer that says X from these sorts of things, like, why is that the case? It's okay for it to be wrong if you know why, because then you can go to the next level. But if you don't even know why, it's a black box. It's actually dangerous in business. So really sort of thinking through those things. This tech will evolve a lot over the next few years. And even in the past 6 months that I've seen it, I've been working deeply in the code even over the past really 6 months. The speed that it's evolving, anything that you're worried about now, give it 6 months, that'll probably be solved.
Oh, yeah. And as Bill Gates said, this is, aside from the internet, this is the biggest thing he's seen in his career, and that says a hell of a lot. I think this morning I was in a coffee shop, and I'm sitting there with a brand new iPad Pro, and for my coaching notes, I bought them, and I'm starting to write coaching notes, and it's something struck me. Well, how am I supposed to sync this thing with my Apple Pro to my Windows computer with my Google shared drive. I just typed a couple of questions in ChatGPT, and within 3 minutes, didn't solve it, but at least I knew what the issues were.
Yeah.
As a tool to help and to accelerate, it's just extraordinary.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's right.
So, sorry, question without notice. Let's get back to it. So what's the future look like for the business, and what do you see as your main challenges?
So this is a really interesting question. It kind of spawns why it is that I'm in this line of work and jumps off that last conversation. Professional services, and when I say that term, I mean kind of lawyers, accountants, consultants. There's a whole bunch of range of things that fit under that. They're all based on the same business model, which is a leverage model. They have finders, minders, and grinders, and you make your money by billing the most number of people out for the most number of hours. But the interesting thing is these new language models technologies are going to automate a lot of that bottom row. Won't necessarily do a whole person's job, but hey, if they can do 30% of a person's job, that's going to materially affect the economics and the business model of professional services. So our belief is that the whole sector is going to be massively disrupted. They're no longer going to be a pyramid scheme. They're actually going to have to change their model. They're going to have to think about value-based work rather than time and materials-based work. There's a huge disruption. And so for us, our business is all about how can we continue to provide the best possible, highest end level of service that we can, whilst exploring those new business models and exploring the technology that's needed to execute on those business models. That in itself is a massive challenge. We're actually building the tech to try and do this, as well as trying to educate and work with clients to say, hey, I know you're used to charging us paying you on T&M basis, but how about we do fixed price models where we actually think about what's the value we're going to provide to you by doing this thing. And then you let us try and figure out how it is that we can use technology to do as much of this as possible and just have us as the counselors, like all of these kinds of ways. It's a really exciting future. I'm kind of really passionate about how is it we can do this and help people do more high value work.
It's a really interesting point. I charge myself out on the basis of a retainer, and with some guarantees thrown in there. And one of the things I've been thinking about, and using ChatGPT as an example, do I actually open the book and show my clients what I'm doing? And do I make myself irrelevant by showing them how to do it? Interesting question. The view I take is to be a key person of influence. It's about giving a lot of stuff away, and eventually it'll come back. So I now use AI significantly when I'm live, when I'm coaching my teams. One client, we're taking on an agronomist. What do the KPIs look like? And then it's a matter of but then coaching the client. Well, now you've got to actually go and work out, does that actually work for your business? And secondly, you've got to sit down with the person you're hiring and agree, they're the right people, and can they achieve but it's I'm finding being very open about how I'm using AI. It is expanding the client's view and obviously accelerating what they're doing. But at the end of the day, they still absolutely need me to coach someone and teach someone how to actually execute on this stuff. Holding accountable, etc. But so I'm in the same situation, but I've just found it. I think the model of the annual, monthly retainer, annual retainer, it fits quite well.
That's right. And as you say, it's actually an interesting conversation that's kind of happening around the place at the moment. What is the financial model for all of these services? Whether it be professional services or even AI services themselves, like SaaS services used to be a monthly subscription, consumption-based model, all these kinds of things. It's not necessarily going to work for AI-based services. It's not going to work for professional services that make heavy use of those things. So it's going to be, we're going to have to figure it out. And I like your approach of being very transparent about it, because I think the best clients appreciate that and will work through with us as professionals about what's the model that even better aligns the value that we generate and provide with the remuneration. I think that's win for everybody.
Yeah, and but I'm fascinated by somebody in that it's, if you think about, so I'm a strategy, leadership, advisor, coach. Where do the majority of the the concepts that I coach come? Where do they come from? Peter Drucker, Jim Collins, all of that, a lot of strategy, doing lots of things. There's Michael Porter, lots of things, small things differently. I think competition to give you an advantage. Right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating when you actually start jumping into the AI and ask it to help you with that stuff. But once again, so the view I've taken is being very open.
Yeah, I like it.
I'll just see it as a very much a value add. Be interesting to have to touch base in 6 months and see how it's going. So your business, your biggest learning since you've been a business owner or been a business leader?
The main thing for me is around the value of talent. I'm constantly amazed when I run into people who will try and save money on talent, and such small percentages. In my experience, like the small percentages that you have to give, and I mean both money, but also non-financial things that you have to give in order to attract and retain just the best people, it pays for itself in space. It's just like a complete no-brainer from an ROI perspective for me. And so that's the thing that I've really enjoyed as being an entrepreneur and a sort of a business leader, is just spending so much of my time thinking about how is it that I can be the best leader that I can be to the best talent that I can get access to. And to forget about the cost of those things. If they're the right people, and I don't just mean like high capability, but I also mean good values, actually nice to work with. I only work with people who are nice to work. If you find those people, like whatever it costs, they're worth it.
Yeah, and you're actually spot on. Having the right people, doing the right things, and as you say, with the right values. I talk of use the we our coaching with our client teams. I'm coaching that they're having a formal coaching session at least once a quarter, but preferably once a month, and evaluating the team based on how do they fit the values of the company and how productive are they in their role and a matrix. And so, well, if they're toxic, well, we don't want them there. And they're the ones that as a basic rule, if you've got a toxic person in the team, they're the ones that make everybody else leave.
Yeah, that's right.
The one
with the dust.
Yeah. Number one, because they're toxic, and number two, because you as a leader are spending all your time managing them and not focusing on your good people.
No.
It's and I agree.
I like your point about feedback too. Like I make it a habit. Have had for the past few years made it a habit within my businesses of fortnightly feedback sessions, my direct reports, and they're two-way. And for me, being a leader is very much about when I get feedback from my team, and I do as much as I can to make certain that they're comfortable doing that, then I make a big show of actioning that feedback and setting an example. Because how do people develop as professionals without feedback from their leaders? It just
absolutely. And how do you know what they're doing, and are they focused on the right things to move them and you forward and the organization forward? I coach leadership teams, weekly, minimum fortnightly one-on-ones. And the other thing is, those companies that aren't performing, that are not performing highly, generally are doing an annual performance review, as the touch base, which of course is driven by money. And one of my clients yesterday, the founder CEO, we were just talking about, he's got a CFO in there that says, well, there's this hierarchy and this is how much we're going to pay. Well, if the person's such a high performer, I don't care how much they get paid. They can surely get paid more than the CEO. But that sort of stuff should be adjusted as required, not every once a year. So it's
that's right.
Whole model around leading and coaching is such a critical skill for people like you and I, Rishni, leaders. And it's one.
I also think that like real high performers, like if you look into some of the research and you work with high performers, what you find is they need to be paid enough so that they're not thinking about money anymore. Then beyond that, money doesn't actually help. Actually, it's the culture and it's the personal development and the impact on the world that they're creating. These things are what get people to stay and to invest. So, too much of a focus on money and annual cycles and the rest of it, not actually focusing on how am I helping this person to develop as a human and a professional. Like, that's what's going to get you to the ROI on that employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like, I'm a member, my business is a member of the 1% Challenge, which I learned from Atlassian. And Atlassian is a IT company, hugely successful in Australia. If you ever want to watch a couple of fabulous things, just Google Atlassian core values and watch the 5-minute video to see why that company is so successful.
Yeah.
But one of the things they do, so 1% of time, 1% of profit goes to charities of the employee's choice. Macquarie Bank does the same. And you wonder why these companies are so successful.
I think that's right. And so I spent a few years in McKinsey and Company, and the thing that made there is how obsessed they are with values internally. And you can use values, and when you use values internally to help direct the thinking, people listen because they're like, actually, that's the most important thing to us. You're raising a values issue. What do we need to do? And it was such an inspiration for me. That's why I'm so drawn to values-led organizations. They're the guiding light, and it gets people to stay.
I'm sorry for that crack of wine. I had a large McKinsey team work for me when I was in banking many, many years ago. And
okay. So you've got
they are fascinating experience. And how McKinsey, how their models, things like the issue tree model, how they get to the root of what we're trying to achieve. And the team I was leading was the largest financial services merger in Australian history up to that time.
Wow.
And I was leading the marketing, branding, and M&A team from within the merger team. Wow. The McKinsey guys just taught me stuff like just extraordinary.
Yeah, they're good. Not perfect, but nobody is. But I've got huge respect for them.
Yeah. And same. So tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind first and why?
This is a funny question. I've never really been driven by public figures or successful figures. Almost nobody comes to mind because the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, for whose definition of success? On one hand, I could think of my mother who spent 40 years in a local primary school as the office admin, raised a happy son. That seems like a pretty good definition of success. Hasn't got any money, didn't change the world, but did what she... So that's one hand. On the other hand, there's plenty of business people that I could name. We were talking about McKinsey. The sort of founding father of McKinsey is actually a guy by the name of Marvin Bower. And the thing that I like about him and that I define him as successful is he instilled the sort of values-led nature of that particular organization. And so someone who is focused on how is it that I can make something values-led, that for me, and actually affects that for me is also a definition of success. So it's not hard for me to answer. Sort of depends on what success means to you.
Firstly, play is back to your mother. Really. And it's fascinating. This is my favorite question of all, as it turns out, because I get such a range of players, and a lot of it is driven by, I can say probably the age, but we get the Elon Musks, we get the Bransons, we also get your point. What is, if someone is satisfied in themselves, it's a really interesting one to go back. I'm going to repurpose some of these videos to show these examples. And if you using Mackenzie example, there was an ex-partner of McKinsey's. His name is Rob Stitch. And Rob Stitch left McKinsey's and went on to become a comedian. He went on to he's now but he's the lead character in the current series on the ABC called Utopia. He produced The Castle. He produced
a great show.
The Dish. And there's another podcast which I highly recommend. I haven't mentioned it before. Called How Other Dads Dad.
Okay.
And this is what the host is a guy called Hamish Blake, who's the host of Lego Masters.
Right? Is that Hamish? Yep.
Yep. And the first interview he did was with Rob Stitch about how he danced. And I recommend that to any parent anywhere. Because number one, it's very funny. But number two, some of the hints, one of the things, Rob Stitch has 5 children, I think, between 13 and 21. And as he said, one of the things, and I've got 2 9-year-olds, one of the things he said to me, was, you really only have 8 summers with your children. Below 4, they're just below 4. Over 12, they want to be with their mates. And so you've got 8 summers to make a really big...
Wow. I thought about it that way. That's such a great perspective.
And there was this whole series of insights. Rob Stitch, one of the things we've done recently is we took straight out of his playbook. I said to the 2 9-year-olds, right, what do you want to do for a week? I actually told them for a weekend. So Rob Stitch had said to his kids, you plan a holiday and we'll do whatever you tell us to do. And it turns out the kids, and only after I asked my kids this, I took them to Uluru last November for my
what?
Kids don't get views. I didn't realize it. It sounds dumb. I didn't realize it. And it's Rob Stitch said, they don't get views. So I asked them on the way. I was listening to this on the plane back. And I said to them when we got off the plane, what's your favourite memory of going to Uluru? And they said, the Fijian waiters singing happy birthday to mum. How many thousands of dollars did I spend on that bloody wasted holiday? Buffet breakfast. How other dad's dad, Hamish Blake, Rob Stitch, listen to it, because when there's a new definition of it for me, successful, Rob Stitch.
Fantastic. I'll definitely listen to it.
I'm well and truly out of control. I'm trying to move myself back. Books, podcasts, there's the sort of biographies you might recommend.
I pulled 3 of my favorite. As you can tell, I obviously do a fair bit of reading, and probably could spend a whole podcast just talking about books with you, Jonathan. But I pulled 3 that I thought might be a little bit interesting. The first one is Endurance, which is the biography of Ernest Shackleton. His trip down to Antarctica in 1914. You said business, but this for me is one of the best examples of leadership. It's actually just the most amazing story I've ever read. And it's a good example of understanding how is it you lead people in times of stress. If people haven't heard of the story and haven't read this, I couldn't recommend it enough. Effectively, man goes down to Antarctica with a team, gets shipwrecked, gets them all back alive in 1914. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The second one, which I would recommend, actually, I'll come down to here, because we were talking about leadership, we were talking about talent. This one, No Rules Rules, by the founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, was probably, it was a really interesting book for me, because it's kind of about, if you have a set of assumptions around the nature of the talent that you've got and the mission that you as an organization are trying to achieve, if those things are in place, you can do a whole bunch of other really interesting things with building company culture. And so that for me was just a really interesting explanation of, okay, if you've got top end talent, what can you do? How can you do things? And throw out the book and think from fresh. I found that really fascinating and amazing. And the last one is The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio being the founder and CEO of one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And this basically is just sort of a exploration of basically the history of the world through a sort of economic development lens. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of the things that we're seeing today, you look at the way that we're seeing the economy move, you look at the way we're seeing governments respond to the economy, businesses, both locally and globally, and all of these patterns have played out before multiple times through multiple different civilizations. None of this stuff is new, actually. It's a cycle that humanity goes through. And I found Ray's book actually to be really helpful and really calming to know that this isn't actually a massive world of uncertainty. There's a fair amount that we've seen before, and we can get through it. We do things right. So that was a really interesting book as well.
Thank you, because they're 3 books that I love as well. And Ray Dalio is like, he's like a multi-billionaire, really fascinating guy. When I was in a past life, my wife and I did some work overseas, and we were in the backwards of Cambodia, and I was reading. Someone had recommended the big tall guy, the motivational speaker,
Not Tony Robbins.
yeah, Tony Robbins. So I recommended a book Tony Robbins had written called Money.
Oh, okay. I haven't read that one.
Yeah, and in there, Ray Dalio had he interviewed. So he interviewed some of the top money managers of the world, and Ray Dalio was talking about if he was giving advice to someone else about how to grow a portfolio but protect it at the same time. This is what the potential investment portfolio was. So I took a fair bit of that on board, and being an ex-banker and fund manager, and I thought, yeah, that's really smart. And I modeled out a self-managed super fund, at least for a period of time based on that. And one of the pieces, we always go through ups and downs. Therefore, you need, can't remember, 7% of your funds in gold. Gold is a classic hedge.
Yeah, that's right.
So we did that, and now we've got more property since. But ups and downs over the last 2014 through to now. That gold as a hedge in our portfolio it's been a cracker piece of advice. That's worth it's a bit out of date now. But then again, as you say, we go through these cycles.
It's really good like that, and investment's an interesting thing. If you have the resources and expertise of Ray Dalio, you will have a certain investment approach, and he will be trying to, in some ways, pick cycles or take advantage of cycles. At the same time, you'll also try and diversify through them. People like me who don't have the time and energy to watch the markets on a daily basis, he has a lot of good advice, which is around the diversity of portfolio and timing the market, not timing the market, and all these kinds of things to help us. I'm busy focused on my consulting business, sort of navigate through these things. So yeah, really like Ray.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And he's out there right now, calling a bit of doom at saying we're going into one of those cycles, and the decisions some of the central bank governors and politicians are making are in fact they're wrong, because this is what this is what they should have learned from the past.
Yeah, that's right. I hope he's wrong.
Hey, me too. Well, but be prepared. One of the things in my business, and I coach my clients, and in our personal life, is we always have a cash buffer.
Yeah, that's right.
So, any last piece of advice or parting words to entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs out there?
I think the last thing I would say, and this, I think you'll probably resonate really strongly with this. I think the skill of being a good leader is massively underrated. And people spend a lot of time investing in sort of tangible skills like, can I write software, and how do I do design thinking, or whatever it is, fund management. And probably people spend not enough time actually asking the question. I like to ask myself the question on a weekly basis: what am I doing to be the best leader that I can possibly be to the set of people that I want to lead? And if people sort of ask that question more frequently and then did the work necessary to build the leadership skills, I think that has a massive impact, not just on the work that you do and the impact that you have, but on the people that you surround yourself with and the relationship you have with those people. I think it's just something that people should spend more time in, and something I'm passionate about.
I totally agree. And another way of putting that is asking yourself every week, and asking your team, what can I do to make your life easier, or make it easier for you to do what you do. I actually have a reminder set up to remind myself to ask my team, and it's as simple as having I talk a lot about rhythms and meeting rhythms and everything else, and having the right questions, asking the right questions, and being open, being open to for them, and being open to the point that they will come to you when they've got a problem. But if you I'm sure you've seen it. Someone's mum dies, someone's dad is sick, someone's child is ill. And if you're not open, that you don't know about this stuff, how do you?
Yeah, that's right.
Really good.
People worry about being open, but what's the alternative? The alternative is that people don't have that trust in you and don't confide in you and don't tell you what the challenges really are. That's much worse than the vulnerability that you risk by being open.
Exactly right.
So I think it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, totally right. It's no, really good advice. Thank you, Rishni. Thanks so much. You can tell I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm well and truly out there, so I apologize. It was supposed to be more about you.
Pleasure. I enjoy it too. It sounds like we've got a lot of common thoughts about leadership and business and
exactly right.
happiness and success.
And there's some great insights in this interview. I really appreciate it. But make sure you go and show your mother that.
I will do that.
Thank you, Rishni.
Thank you. All the best.
Cheers.